But thank you. I truly, truly appreciate you coming to join, to even chat with me today, to even give me a little bit of your time, because I know you're super busy. I mean, like, we are like in a time where we're booked and busy, really, right? Like, I'm sure your calendar is overflowing.
Busiest I've ever been. Never even imagined I would be talking to people about waiting lists. Never thought that have to work on my own boundaries around, when I don't take people after about 8:30, but that's still a late night.
That's a late night. Look, you see my face. I'm like, oh, 8:30. Yeah,
Yes.
that's late.
But that's only the days that I start at 12, because I have to decide for myself, am I going to start? There are other days I start at 8:15 and I'm done at 2, right? And then there are other days I start at 12 and I may go, because I get to control. It's one of the things I enjoy about being a therapist.
Yeah.
But you have to meet people where they are. So there are people that won't put their kids to bed until, right? And by the time they're ready at 7:30, that's when they can make some time for themselves,
Right. Understandable. So let people know who you are and what you do.
I love it. I love it. So I am Camille Banksley, and I am a licensed psychotherapist in New York State. And I am a change of careers therapist who reluctantly came into the field, but love it. It doesn't even feel like work. It has become a passion for me. Previously, I was a teacher and I was an executive director of a youth development agency, and I've always loved working with people, but I never thought about processing and doing the psychodynamic work that we're doing, meeting people on this journey. It can be really sad. It can be, cathartic. It's such a courageous thing to decide to want to do, to be a therapist and to engage in therapy, right? So I'm a mom of 3. I'm a wife. I'm a friend. I'm a huge Peloton enthusiast. I know people ask me all the time. They're like, do they give you money? They do not give me money, but they help me with my sanity. I do something called Black Girl Magic, and there are almost 20,000 of us there who ride the bike daily together. And that's really just about movement and about, mind, body, and spirit. But I really, like I said, I feel like I was chosen to do this. I didn't think that I would be a therapist previously. And I think about all the stigmas attached to it. So there's a lot of shame for us for years around the idea of, making the decision. Many people still think therapy is not for Black people. So, when I joined with you on the directory, I wanted people to have access so that they wouldn't have to just find me through Psychology Today. They weren't just looking through the melanin,
Right.
And also I wanted to be able to support all of us in this journey, because it is a community. Even what you're doing as a service on Instagram, people will tell me that they will search. They'll put in a search Black female therapy. That's how they sort of find us.
Wow. That's good to know. I always want to know, like, how people are finding us. So that's always good. But I do want to talk to you about, like, what made you change careers to come over to be a therapist.
So my word for 2021, it was authenticity. So I speak this. My mom had cancer, and I didn't expect her to die. I did not expect her to die. The exact year before my father died of cancer, and literally by the time she passed, I was at my wit's end. Didn't know how I was going to just move through life. And my doctor, my regular doctor, who I was going to see because I couldn't sleep and was crying all the time, she said, "You realize that you're depressed and that the grief is taking over you." My sons were 2 and 3. They're exactly 12 months apart, and I was having a hard time being present. And she said, "I can give you a sleeping pill, prescription, but I think you need to see someone. And because this is the other reason I went through the directories of looking for someone that was a Black female, somebody that specialized in grief, that had my insurance, and could not find anyone that was willing to work with me. So when I finally did that, and it really changed my life, I went back to school. And said, with renewed enthusiasm, not to brag, I'd already had 2 other master's degrees. And people said, you want to go to school to talk to people about their problems? Like, you don't need another master's degree to do that. But, on the other side of it, I just think of what it's like to be reluctant to go to therapy. I think about what it's like to be told to go to church, to be told to pray. I again was that reluctant person, but I really am just so glad that like all of my circumstances led me here, because I don't think if I hadn't been in the belly of the beast, and by that I'm just talking about like I had difficulty sleeping, I had difficulty caring about my parents. They weren't obvious. I wasn't like I was walking around like, with my head, down, but I just couldn't find happiness in anything, Amber. I couldn't find joy. And I know that so many people that come see me now feel that same way. And there's a part of me that we say, like, your heart recognizes somebody else's heart. They don't have to identify everything. The person doesn't have to be my same age. They don't have to be heterosexual. They don't have to be, but they do need to, for me to feel like I can hold that space with them, and that, that I can recognize that pain and emptiness, and know that there's a way to get out, right? That there is a way to get out. And so I feel like, healers heal, and right. And like, hurt people and healed people, then heal people. So, my story's different than a lot of other therapists, but I love it every day. Every day I'm so excited, to work with people.
So what do you think that reluctancy came from with you? Like, I'm not there before you even got there. Like, I'm not going to therapy.
My grandmother's saying, you better not tell nobody, right? That stays in this house. And then the other thing was my masks. I'd always been taught how to look and be and perform. And so to be vulnerable and naked in the room, you have to undress. It's a very intimate relationship, you with a therapist. And so many of us have not been taught to be that way. We have not been taught to be authentic and transparent. It's like, put your big girl panties on, put your lipstick on, right? Fix your wig, do all that kind of stuff. All of those things are perpetuating in us not being authentic with each other, not seeing each other. And so I think it's still difficult. I mean, I as many relationships as I can, I talk to people about me going to my own therapy because I want to normalize it in conversation. I talk about my children needing it or at different points, but it's culturally, we just were taught that it wasn't for us.
Yeah. So do you see that a lot with people that come into therapy saying like they never thought they would come to therapy, or even reluctant to hear or receive what you're saying to them?
So, what's interesting, because I have a very specific way to be, right? So I have to talk to people in the beginning about what they're expecting from therapy, right? Because a lot of times people think it's a magic wand, and I'm sure, right? So they're like, my daughter still has a bad attitude. You know what I mean? She's like, well, right. We have to take a step back, but the reluctance is a lot less. What I find is that when people finally get to me, and so without BFT and other directories that, right, when they get to me, the very first thing I ask is, what brought us together? What made you decide now was the time that you wanted to reach out to me? And I talk about us building the relationship, because people always come with what they think they're there for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's never it. It's not
Never it. Never ever it. And so we think we're like, I'm here because my husband and I are fighting. I'm here because I hate my job. I'm here because I don't love myself as much. And through the relationship and through the work together, but the building of that trust, I have found, because of social media and the idea of what therapy looks like, even in public, consumption, like on TV, right? So people think they're going to come and I'm going to have my glasses and I'm going to look down my nose, right? And they're going to sit on the couch, and 60 minutes later, they're going to walk out and feel better. And what helps is they know that they have to do something. But I think it's so individual. I mean, it's funny because I know they can't see me, but I'm laughing because I'm like my CBT toolbook. That toolbook isn't for everybody, right?
Right. It's
right. And majority of people are going to say, I'm not doing homework. Mm-hmm. That's not what I want to do.
Yes.
So I will say, I'm seeing it less. Thankful to you and thankful to all these influencers and people that are talking about therapy and possibly, but the actual work of it, and that's the thing, it's not the 45 minutes in the room. A lot of it is right? What are you doing consistently? And that's where, the emotional regulation and thinking about making other choices, that's the harder part, reprogramming ourselves.
Yeah. I think I agree with you there. Even going to therapy, myself, I also, I might say one thing to a client, but I'm also a client too, and I'm a human. And, just even going through that ourselves, and it's difficult. And it really is have to be something that you are mindful of and trying to be aware of, because you've been this way X amount of years. You never thought it was an issue. And now, like you said, reprogramming and unlearning some behaviors that weren't healthy or still are not healthy. You have to kind of catch yourself in the moment and say, okay, and that's a big deal. But getting to therapy is good. How can we get more of us to therapy? How can we start breaking this stigma? Even though I think we're doing a really, really good job now. I mean, it is working. We're working towards it, but we still have a long way to go.
Okay, I got you.
Okay.
So I'm going to say it's like kissing frogs. And this is what I mean. I think the more accessible we have, we can. So in the idea of dating, right? Before Tiana kissed the frog and he became the prince, she has to kiss a lot of other frogs. Okay. I think we need to spend that 10, 15 minutes with that complimentary phone consultation that many therapists offer. I would ask some critical questions, and that, do you have your own therapist, right? What ways would you work with me? Right? Do you provide homework? I think that there are questions that you would want to know, but the trick is you've got to be in it to win it, right? So you have to actively be seeking. You and I had talked about, most therapists have waiting lists now. Yeah. If you send an email and you're engaged, we don't usually have time to answer the phone. Mm-hmm. If you say a little bit about yourself, you talk about what times you might be available. I can do it during the day. I'm open to teletherapy. It's that personal connection of like that handoff, but it's the accessibility. So people say to me all the time, I want to meet somebody nice. I want to meet a nice guy. And I'll ask them, what are you doing? Are you going out? Are you socializing? Are you on any of the dating apps? And if you aren't, do your friends know that you'd like to meet a nice person? And what are you doing to promote your own interests and passions? Because a lot of times the things that you look at a therapist, and I can't tell you how many people, I'm sure, because I was on a Clubhouse in Peloton talking about mental health, that responded and said, wow, how can I find you? But I'm just one, right? So you creating the directory, having other directories, going on Ayana therapy, going on the space I use called Headway. Headway, money is a big deterrent. So let's just talk about that for a second. Lots of people of color have not decided it's a value, right? Mm-hmm. So everybody knows that Louis Vuitton is not $50, right?
Yes, they do.
So we don't price a value, right? So if I say an average therapy session is going to be $100 to $150, people would say, I'm not paying $150 a week, but they will tell you about this Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Balenciaga, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Because they think there's a value in it, but they haven't decided this makes real value.
Yeah. Right? So that's what I'm saying. Like, how can we get people to start valuing the service of therapy and even starting to break some of those barriers and the stigma that's in the Black community about therapy and valuing this over that?
Well, you and I started by talking. So people will see us and they're like, well, wow, look at them. They're normal and they go to therapy, right? So the TikTok influencers, the people that are coming on and doing little 10 seconds, there are a couple of buzzwords that are driving me crazy a little bit right now, because everybody is not a narcissist, right? Everybody, right, is not a borderline. They don't have bipolar. Those are medical terms that I sometimes, when I hear them so lightly being tossed around, because that's what people are afraid of, being called that, right? So the biggest thing for me is that it's almost a luxury item. So when you watch The Real Housewives, I know none of your listeners do, but other people that might watch that, but they see them on reality television and they see that they're going to therapy. It's I've noticed it's been a shift, because people are like, well, if Nini's going to therapy or this one's going to therapy, maybe I need to go to therapy, right? Maybe this is something that's aspirational, but in small ways, making it accessible. If we have insurance, right? If we have insurance, I'm like, use your insurance.
Yeah. And it's so interesting that you say that, because we have a lot of people that will say, oh, I didn't even know my insurance will pay for this. And I'm like, yeah, let's use it, and not even knowing how to use it. So
it's complicated. So Amber, though, so it shouldn't be this complicated. I have Blue Cross Blue Shield. It is the most craziest way to, right? I don't even take Blue Cross Blue Shield, but yet I have it, right? Because I'm not in network with them, right? But I am with Cigna and Aetna and a bunch of things through an organization that got me credentialed. It was easier. Right. But I'll say this, if you really want it, right? Clubhouse is a perfect example. I must have joined in October. My friend was like, it's really secretive, only a few people, like you have to have an iPhone, right? And I was like, so whenever people make it selective, some people are like, that's what I need. That's what I want to have, right?
Right.
Ivy Park is a perfect example, right? The Ivy Park goes on sale. It sells out in an hour, right? Can't get it unless you're going to pay. So therapy is not seen like that, but it's beginning to get less stigmatized, but we have to start asking for what we want.
Yeah.
Right. And through our insurances, but a big part of it is going to be normalizing it, right? Getting people to talk about it. Rappers are starting to rap about it. And because of that, that will change. There's beginning to be a shift. But look, at one point we couldn't even talk about, I'm gonna probably get in trouble for saying this, but I'm gonna do it anyway. So a lot of our weight, right? A lot of the weight that's weighing us down is because we're eating as a coping mechanism. So like Black women tend to have higher rates of obesity. That's what I knew I was going to get in trouble, but I'm going to say it anyway. But part of it is because it's a socially acceptable way as a coping mechanism. I had a really bad day. It was long and it was tiring. So I'm going to have macaroni and cheese. I'm going to eat fried chicken, because that's going to be how I make myself feel better. I'm not going to go for a run. I'm not going to get on my Peloton because I don't want to sweat my hair out. And so we don't have other coping mechanisms. Exercise and is a form of an antidepressant, and I only use that. And eating, nothing wrong with eating. It's the excessive. It's the fact that we eat a lot of sugar and we do a lot of those things, but people don't see how that's connected to our mental health, because then it's connected to our self-esteem, and then it's connected. We don't want to go to the doctor at all because the doctor is going to say, hey, Missy, you're getting up there. And I'm not talking about BMI or European models of, I'm just talking about like health and wellness. And when we're talking about health and wellness, mental is a big one.
Yeah. Now, do you think that with you saying that though, a lot of things when we're young, it shapes our behavior, our perspective of things, So if we were never taught that as a coping mechanism, and we were taught this as a coping mechanism, then we're still staying on that same trajectory, right?
Oh my gosh. Look, we are preaching tonight. Because I'm doing some work, and again, I know it sounds like psychobabble, but I'm working on healing the little girl in me. Because the little girl in me, when she was starting to get, puberty, is starting to get, chubbier, my family was like, well, she's going to have no peach cobbler for her. She's going to have Jell-O. Like everybody else can have, right? Because she's getting chubby. So I started to hear that, but then they would be like, okay, here, sneak it to me, right? My grandmother would say, all right, here. And then she would complain because she's like, oh, you're getting, you're too pretty to be this way. So the coping mechanism would be, here's potato chips. Here's whatever the things that soothing me, the things that I learned. Nobody said, let's go take a walk. Let's do do these other kinds of things. So our families, this is generational of years of sweet potato pie and all of the things that do feel good, right? But then to what extent, right? What are the ramifications and consequences that we have? It's diabetes. There are other kinds of things. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on weight because I feel like, but it's one coping mechanism, because it could be alcohol. So during the pandemic, people were telling me they were drinking, a bottle of wine a night, or they were like, I don't know how that vodka is already, I don't know. They were on Zooms, and then people were having cocktails, and it was like, it was another bad day. And we were watching racial, marches and fighting. And so how do we self-soothe? I mean, you can see, right? I have my candles. I do a lot of, right? I have my sage, but my grandmother never said, sit down and light a candle and think and do deep breathing, ground yourself. It really was, there's ice cream. I mean, and this was in my particular, but then when I was wearing externally all the padding of the sugar, right? It was then, how am I going to deal with my self-esteem? Because I'm not a normal weight. But relearning and unlearning, I'm so glad you brought those up. I'm still working on that right now, 40 something years old. And I say that because it's never too late.
Yeah.
Right? It's never too late, but it is a process, and I don't beat myself up, but all of the things, and I'm sure there are parallel processes, right? I talk to people, and I love that, you do an affirmation every day. And I'll say that's one of the hardest things, because when we pass a mirror, and even when we look in ourselves, we're like, ooh, look at that, right? You see something new or something you don't like, where we never really look by the mirror and say, all right, girl, you're doing it. You might sometimes, right?
Right.
But mostly we're checking ourselves out in a critical way. The thoughts are not helpful. Sometimes they're distortions. And even though it's something, and that's one of the things I love about TV. So being Mary Jane, whether you watched it or not, on the outside, she looked good, right? Gabrielle Union's character, but she was really struggling. And even she had these sticky notes and she had to write the affirmations. And right. And I always say that. So from the outside, right, she had a Porsche Cayenne and great job and beautiful clothes, but she was miserable.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think we can do to, or what can we do to, for us who have children and want to do it differently this time? What can people do to try to change that?
So I'm a work in progress myself. But one of the things, and I do talk about myself in the context of being a role model. So my kids see me set my alarm, and I work with the BGM. There are women on, right? There's the little to high five, so they know it's a consistent part of my life. They are constantly seeing water bottles, right? So I'm always talking about drinking, but being the role model, right? So when my son was having a difficult time, he missed his prom last year, was going through lots of different things. He was like, I'm just not happy. I found him a Black male therapist because he felt uncomfortable talking to me and his father, because I think it's like private. It's like, I want to, I don't want to see you guys. I want to talk to another person. But I think our children are always watching. They're like little tape recorders. So when we use negative language about ourselves, when we say boys don't cry, get yourself together, when we say disparaging, I think sometimes, around race, I listen sometimes. We don't intentionally do it, but we might say things and kids are hearing and listening to what we're saying. And it comes out in other ways. Like, I'll give you a perfect example. My son's going to kill me, but he got cornrows, right? And I was thinking, boy, how are people going to perceive you? Is a totally different way when your hair was neat, right? And I was joking, and I said something like, like some of these fancy places, you're going to have a hard time. But my much younger son doesn't. Why can't he wear cornrows? And then last night when we were watching the Oscars, Leslie Odom Jr., right, had cornrows, right? And I was like, well, there I stand corrected, right? Because here he is nominated. That was something that I had to learn. So I have to work on that, about not making sure I have to pay attention. I don't have daughters, but when I'm being negative about my looks, or if I'm saying something, they're listening. So if my mommy, who I think is beautiful and amazing, is complaining about her thighs or her arms or a wrinkle, or we're sending the message that we're not okay, just the way we are.
Yeah. What about people who are a little bit older, who may want to go to therapy, but kind of like you said, wasn't really interested in being vulnerable or opening up about anything? Because my family has always taught me, we handle it ourselves, or we pray about it. And so going to therapy doesn't feel right, because I just was never taught to go talk to a therapist.
I'm so glad you're asking this, because this is a really important question. For me, it's, what do I want this experience to be? So I always ask people that, even when they say they want a relationship or they want a companion, tell me what it is that you think you want. It's very similar to therapy, so that you can match with the right thing. So some people are going because they want advice. That is not typically what we do.
Yeah.
It is, we're working on developing insight, right? We're working on asking questions so that you can sort of go towards a goal that's yours. So it's sort of like, well, I want to be better. Some people want a safe place to really divulge and talk about, some of their past. Some people don't want to talk about their past. They'll say, I want to plan. So 50-year-old, like a transition, right? So I'm 50, my kids are out of the house. What's next for me? Your therapy session, and you can say, I'd like to talk about my conflicted feelings about that, right? They don't come out as easily, but I'll say you'll know if you can work with somebody, from that initial conversation. And then if it doesn't work, this is the best thing. You send an email and say, thank you for the experience. It was wonderful, but it's time for me to go to my next frog. I mean, you don't have to tell them that, but like, what am I missing? But what do I want? And I think, Amber, that's something that we're not getting enough of. What do I want to even feel? Do I want to feel relieved? Do I want more balance? Because people don't really know what they want. Like they'll say something really, obtuse, like, I want to be happy. I just want to be happy. Well, what does happy look like for you? Because what happy looks like for Amber might be very different than what it looks like for Camille, right? I want to sleep through the night. I want to have a tight core. It's a whole other thing, right? But am I working towards the things I want? If I want a companion, if I want to be in therapy and I want clarity, I want help with goal setting, I want help with, I ask people to try to be as specific as possible, not necessarily in that first, because for me, the very beginning is around engagement. Do I feel comfortable? Do I want a second date? And that's a lot of time. I'll say, go on a lot of first calls, right? Does this person make me feel, I had a therapist once, I just called her on the phone and she came highly touted. She was on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan in this big office. And I finally got through to her. And literally she said, what do you want? Are you in crisis? What is the problem? Like you've left too. And I was scared, right? Because I was like, and I just hung the phone up. And I said, this isn't the right person for me because I wasn't necessarily in crisis. And I was thinking, I didn't like the way it made me feel. And one of the lessons I learned, that's why I say to people, send an email because the person can process it at another time. And then people will say to me, oh, she didn't respond to an email. I'll say, follow up and say, following up, I sent an email a week or two ago. I'm not sure if you're available. But like I said, more often than not, things, the right therapist will come. It sounds like, the teacher will come, right? When you ask for them, but you have to do the work to follow up.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's super important. I try to talk about that all the time. It's dating. It's like dating. You might go on one date and say, hey, this isn't my partner. Let me go on to the next. The same thing.
It's true. It's true. I mean, that's what I was saying about like, so I love a lot of times people call me and they're like interviewing me, right? Like, where'd you go to school? Right. What are the interventions you use? Right. So I'll say, so I went to NYU, I went to Ford, I went to this school, right? I'll say, well, I use I'm an eclectic. I use, varied, I use CBT, right? But I don't do EMDR, right? I don't do, I've done trauma-focused work, like trauma-focused CBT. I found I have to meet the person. We have to begin to, right? Because people will say they want to do the things, but they don't want to do the homework involved with CBT or with DBT or some of those other things. And those are like our tricks of the trade, but we don't really lead with that. Would you agree with that? That's not the most important thing.
Yeah. Telehealth, it does open it up for people who are afraid, like you said, of being judged, right? And saying like, I need the help, but I don't want to kind of be in person yet. I want to work my way up to.
Okay. So let's talk about this. I was just having a controversy about text therapy, BetterHelp, and some of the other platforms so this is what scares me about some of that. I think it is absolutely a great foray. I even tried it as a consumer. I was like, I'm gonna, get a sign in as a profile and see what it's like to be texting back and forth with the therapist. And so what I found was it was helpful, but the level of engagement, right, is different. So if you're going to a trainer and the trainer tells you, do 10 jumping jacks, do 10 mountain climbers, 10 burpees, and I'll be back, right? Now, if it's me, I'm like this. Oh, when he comes back, yeah, right? Because I'm faking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You weren't there with me. You didn't check my form. That's what it is. It is a great starting point, right?
Yeah.
To get people's feet wet. I worry about people that are there for, deeper level things.
Mm-hmm.
But telehealth is different, right? The texting is what bothers me a little bit, particularly with teenagers, because then when does it stop? How do you get boundaries? There's something around this idea that we have a start and a stop.
Mm-hmm.
You can't text your therapist at 12:30 at night,
Right.
and say, should I call him? Should I go over there? Because I think, right, should I look through his phone? Because we're not friends. And it has this, it blurs some of the lines. That's one of the things I've been concerned about. But I do think, to your point, you might have access. So I can take care of my kids. I can run them back and forth to school. I can make dinner in between my Zooms. Whereas when I was in my clinic or at different offices, I had to worry about travel time. I had to worry about, right? So it's been great for that.
Right. And I think, like you said, it's pros and cons to both, right? Because I like you, I also tried it. I'm like, let me see how this works. And I didn't do the text, I did the voice, and just to see. And that can be cathartic as well. I need to talk to someone about this, like whatever that is. And like I think it's a good stepping stone, like you said, to get you to wherever that is. But I think because this is coming out in May, obviously, Mental Health Month. So we have, for people who are struggling and saying, like, I do know I have issues, or things I want to address, concerns or goals that I want to get to, but I am still on the fence about receiving therapy. What are like 3 things that people can do to decide if they should move forward with therapy, or is that something that they can work on?
That is such a good. Now I wish that we had So, okay, so this is interesting because I've talked to parents and done lots of presentations about when do I have to find a professional, right? When can I not sit in the kitchen and tell my girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
She doesn't want to hear one more thing about my boss or one more thing about my husband or my kids.
Right.
So it's really around the intensity of when it starts to interfere with your functioning. And I talk about interfering with functioning because, right, I knew it was time for me. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't I wasn't present. So it starts to interfere, right? And so we all have a baseline of what's good for us, right? Where we are. And if we don't, right? So on a scale of 1 to 5, and 5 is, SpongeBob, best day ever. Most of us live around 3.
Mm-hmm.
It's when you're spending a lot more days at 1, right? 1 and 2. And it's a struggle to get to 3. And 3 is just okay. It's not thriving because, right? So we need to be talking to ourselves like we want to thrive. We want to have joy. And so, when you are no longer able within your own to get back together, right? And so even, right, chocolate cake or spending time with your friends or pizza night, none of those things are bringing you from 1 to 3. And you're saying to yourself, great, because this is this insight that we're always trying to work on, like in therapy, around I used to feel, right? And that's the idea, because some of us don't remember a time, or people will say, I'll ask them in therapy, when was the last time, you felt good, or you felt content, or you felt fulfilled, or you felt, right? And a lot of times what people, right, go all the way back to when I was a child. It's been that long. And so this idea of marrying a concept of a therapist is a person that can help me move, right, from 1 to 3, and then maybe from 3 to 5. And I just use that scale because it's when we're 1, we're just not really good for ourselves. So it's around the intensity, the severity, and the duration, right? So it's like the stuff we learn in school. So if you're drinking 5 of the 7 day out of the 7 days, right, that's more, right, than what is helping you function. And because this is around functionality and about whether or not you're thriving. So when we're talking about our children, and they're not, and let's say they don't eat, right? And it's like, okay, you got to eat some of that broccoli, right? We're always bargaining with them, right? It's the same thing with ourselves. It's like, well, if I'm not feeling any better, right? I don't know about you, but I don't like to go to the doctor. But there are certain times when you're right, it's like, well, this has gone on for 3 days. We don't check in with our mental health like that. That's the idea of it. It's like, there have been too many days, the anxiety, I'm starting to feel heart palpitations. I'm fretting or not wanting to go to work. I'm isolating more. It's really paying attention. And I was talking about like a self-assessment. So, we do as clinicians, we're always doing assessments, but that assessment is an internal assessment. Where, I ask my kids every day, tell me about your day, right? Not because if you ask kids, did you have a good day? Yes. Well, right, fine. They're going to give it, right? So, but you can say, tell me what was the most exciting part of your day, or what was the high point, or what do you think was the low point? Because it allows for more conversation. So the thing is to do like that personal assessment and ask yourself, like, where am I on that scale of 1 to 5? And in order to be a 5, is it my mental health that I need? Now, I'm big on the idea of mind, body, and spirit being in balance. Most of us got one of them together. Like, we're marathon runners, but can run every day, but our minds are not where they need it to be, and our spirits are not connected. So it's really trying to form that pyramid where there's balance, where you're not doing so much of one and not the other two. But I would say it's around functioning for me. And then this idea of like, I want to be at peak performance. I want, like, life is such a gift. I want to, maximize it. I don't want to just, exist. I want to thrive.
Yeah. That's really, really good. I'm gonna like tweet that one.
I love it that you can have so many platforms. I'm like, it's like pick one, right? I always do it.
I can only do one.
Right. But you're right. And it's sort of like, because we're responsible for the effort, not the outcome. Our efforts are going to be, right? So I don't know that my sons are going to, everybody's like, oh, and I hope you're raising good men. And I'm like, I'm doing my best, right? So that they're empathetic and thoughtful and kind, and that they're emotionally can process. I mean, it's so funny. Like, my kids are actually way better than I am about expressing their feelings and about pushing back. About, like, I forget, my son was like 6, and I said something. He's like, "You broke my feelings, Mama. You broke my feelings." And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Well, you said, that was stupid of me." And I had actually said that, right? But I was like, no, I mean, I meant, of course, not your snowshoes. It's like, and then I said, bring your boots downstairs, but I was talking about rain boots, but I didn't say rain boots. He brought down snow. And I was like, come on, that, it's not snowing outside. And he was like, but I'm not stupid. You broke my feelings. Like, but just the idea of, it was a way I could say it. Am I really angry? Is it that deep? Maybe I should have, started leaving earlier, just thinking critically and being thoughtful. And then one other thing I will just say, I think people, if you could take the time to write, even if you use your phone in your notes section, to check in with yourself, right? To write that down. because a lot of times we don't. How am I doing today? Is this a good day? Start to check in, right?
I do try to post that a lot because I think, like you say, we just get so caught up in day to day, and it's just autopilot, right? I get up, I go to work, I do this, I do that, I come home, I cook, I clean, I get the kids to bed, like whatever. And you never checking in with yourself to see, what am I feeling? And if I am feeling this way, why? And what's going on with me, so that I can feel that hole or whatever it is. Maybe I'm tired. I just need to rest. But we just keep going and going and going. So I do try to talk about that a lot, like self check-ins. How are you feeling right now? Just take a moment, take 5 minutes, and just check in with yourself.
It's just something that we're not even taught. When we ask people, how are you doing, we're already locked and loaded with the response, because
Yeah.
And I'm very sensitive with other therapists, because I feel sometimes I forget about how much we're holding when people are so sad and people are either broken, or when people are processing. Our days can be so heavy, and then our friends and family want and need us.
Yeah. I have a friend that does that. Before she will pour into me about what's going on with her life, she'll say, hey, I have something that I want to talk about. Do you have space for this? And I love that she does that. I love
Oh my God.
Sometimes I'll say, no, I actually don't. And she'll say, okay, well, I'll check back in with you later. Or sometimes I'm like, yeah, call me. And, then we'll talk about it. So I love that about her. So I try to do that same thing for her and to others before I start pouring out. Let me tell you what happened today, because I don't know what you're dealing with, and I don't want to weight you with my stuff too. So I think that is awesome. So I always talk about that too.
I think that,
thank you so much. I feel like I've already taken so much of your time. Thank you for coming on and sharing your wealth of knowledge. How can people find you if they want to connect with you?
The easiest way is CBL Psychotherapy, which are my initials, Camille Banksley, but CBL Psychotherapy. I couldn't be so creative when I was thinking about my LLC name, but it's the easiest way, and I prefer not to do DMs. But my email is there. It's also really easy. It's CamilleBanksley@gmail.com. And I love to talk about the stigma. I'm in graduate school to get my doctorate, so that just so that I can find more ways to be clinically and culturally competent, and to help all of us, raise the bar.